Here's the podcast from our live show up at the Lord Alfred in Brisbane. Huge thank you for everybody who played the part in organising that, but most importantly, you guys that were there. I'm sure our listeners will love it just as much as our live audience did. Big shout out to Ladbrokes and the Lord Alfred Hotel for organising this. We had a blast up there recording this episode with the great Wally Lewis and Ryan Girdler. How about that for the very first live bar round show? We've got Origin legends in the house. Wally Lewis, everybody. And we got Ryan Girdler as well.
Come on, you can do better than that. Fair dinkum. If you're going to boo a New South Welshman, you've got to do a bit better than that. Girds will tell you he was part of the group. Whenever I used to play in Sydney, I'd go on there to the national anthem, singing the national anthem of Wally Sucks or Wally's a Wanker. That was my welcome. And I still get it. I don't play there anymore.
We love you, Wal.
Every time I go down there,
you broke our hearts so many times, mate. You broke our hearts so many times. So,
well, that's a very respectful, warm welcome to our two guests, so thank you so much for that. First question, guys. This is the first half of the show as well is going to be more of a Queensland focus. The second half a New South Wales focus. So firstly, for me, like Tommy said, I am an outsider, but from the outside looking in, it certainly appears that Origin means more to Queenslanders. Is that something that you agree with, Wally? And what does that, if you do believe that, what is that down to?
Well, we understand that New South Wales will deny the strength of Origin on that fact that it means more to us. But for a Queenslander that used to go along and watch the Queensland teams play year after year and be absolutely thrashed during occasions like this, and on a number of occasions, the stars of the New South Wales team were Queenslanders that had relocated. And why did they go to Sydney? Well, they were playing in the best rugby league competition in the world. They were getting paid far more money to go down there, so you certainly could not blame the players for going down there. The comp up here was still very competitive, and we thought that we produced some fairly handy players to go down there. And throughout the course of 1970s, we used to hear a lot of the Queenslanders sort of take that to a new level and just say, we've had a gutful of this, give us our players back, we've got to form a game, and that was the birth of State of Origin. It came around and we got the opportunity to be able to take pack. And I still remember there was one guy that said, have a look at the New South Wales pack, this tells the story. They've got Arthur Beetson, John Lang, Rod Morris, Rod Reddy, as part of their kit in the second row, and they were the guys that delivered a lot of pain for Queensland when they came up here. But we had to cop it, and thankfully State of Origin came about, and I'm sure even the New South Wales supporters enjoyed seeing an entertaining game of football rather than the thrashings that were commonly handed out by New South Wales. And the birth of Origin football was the rebirth of representative football, and all of a sudden we were about to see some exciting encounters virtually every time the players ran onto the field.
Yeah, so that's going back, what, 50, 60 years now, 40, 50 years. But why is it now for this group of players? Why does it seem that it means more to this Queensland team? Well, I think it was the year 2000 where it was the worst Queensland team ever assembled and an impossible series to lose. But it seemed that year specifically, they drew on that spirit. Like, how does it still linger? How is it still a factor?
Well, the more games you lose, the less entertaining it is for you as a player. I don't know any of us three that ever enjoyed a losing game that we played in. When that came about, the Queenslanders, I think, had to offer an excuse to their fans and probably the enemy as well. Why they weren't winning those games. It's hard to come up with an answer outside New South Wales were too good. They came up with some sensational performances, but it kind of all got started back in the beginning of the Origin. I I hate to harp on it, but there was a New South Wales team that had a forward pack of Arthur Beetson, John Lang, Rod Morris, and Rod Reddy. There were 4 great forwards that were playing in that lineup. So the National Rugby League, I think, helped begin the interstate rivalry. All of a sudden, the Broncos were playing, and I'm sure a lot of people south of the border used to say that that gave us an opportunity to hate you wankers from Queensland every week. We got the chance to be able to do it, and the claim from us was that we played pretty good football. It took the Broncos 5 years to win a competition, but all of a sudden I think the standard of football in the NRL as it became had suddenly reached a new height. And there was no excuses offered. There couldn't be by any of the Queenslanders. But the real glory for them was state of origin. And I think, Girds would agree that it is the match that you dream about playing all of your life. Young boys are born into the sport and they're coming up, and now we've got the girls playing origin matches as well. And they all come up with the same claim that's the glory that they wish to be able to enjoy.
Girds, what about you? How does it make you feel when you hear people talk and say it just means more to the Queenslanders than what it does to the New South Welshmen?
Oh, Jimmy, I believe that any good sporting concept needs a hero and a villain. And it's all about stories for me, right? So I know my story, and we all know the story of how Queensland and that came to be. And the fact that they I think they sell that story really well, and they connect the community. I mean, I've played plenty of games at Lang Park in Origin, and I've been up there and watched the Broncos play, and I know that it's the biggest show in town unless there's like a Gymkhana in Ipswich. Otherwise, they're all out there. But look, I got a chuckle from the king.
That's very good. That's very good.
Look, and so we know what it represents. Like, I know that, I sat in front of the TV. I was just telling Charlie, like, when I was a boy, I was allowed up past 7 o'clock 3 times a year, and that was for the 3 Origins. And I watched Wally, and Wally broke my heart on every occasion, and that's how excited I was, and one day to be able to pull on that blue jersey. So I know what that story meant to me and what it represents to me and my family. But do New South Wales sell their story to the people and to the state as well as Queensland and that underdog status and all that sort of stuff? Well, we don't. No, it doesn't get sold. And that's what I'm excited about today. And I don't want to skip forward to today's game, but there's an opportunity for, New South Wales today to be the story. And we're never usually the story. I remember, they went on 8 in a row and they had Inglis and Thurston and Smith and Lockyer and Inglis. And it's like, and you go in every game as underdog with that side. It's ridiculous. And these Ladbrokes guys, I mean, they're unbelievable. I mean, New South Wales go into every series as favourites, even though they'd lost 7 in a row. And it's like, we're favourites again this year. It's ridiculous because even the Queenslanders sell the story to the betting agencies, which blows my mind. So Origin is about the theatre, Jimmy. It's really about theatre. And, I'm happy to say that we do it differently than Queensland. But what they do and how they present the opportunity for the players is a really special thing that I really admire. And I also think it comes back to talent pool as well. So, I mean, from New South Wales, we mightn't have better players, but we have probably a deeper pool of similar players. So we're always leaving Origin players out, and Queensland probably don't have the depth of pool, the depth of talent. So, when they get a couple of injuries, they're pulling guys out of reserve grade and telling them the story. And people are buying the story. And then you're getting guys like Dearden, like last year in Game 3. We come up here, we dominate Game 2. Everyone thinks it's a foregone conclusion, Game 3. No Munster. I think Tuolangi's out. So there's all these things that can go wrong for Queensland that do go wrong. And yet they get down there on Suncorp. They connect with their tribe, their people. They find something. And they find a way to win and get the result.
Do you think that's what it is, Girds? The connection to the people, the connection to the hardship that the people have gone through. I know for myself, coming from the north of England, there are more hard-nosed people based off what they've been through, based off the type of people that come from the north versus what comes from the south. And anyone that's here if you meet someone from the north, they're different from people from the south. And I think it would be the same said that there's something different about Queenslanders to New South Welshmen.
I moved up here 2 years ago, and I've really been taken by the people up here in the way that they are, and they're different. It's got a real community feel to it. Yeah, it's they really are. You know, I find the difference between I lived in Sydney like 35 years. And I grew up in Wollongong, which was very community-based as well. And people, when they would ask you, how you doing, they would actually wait for an answer. Whereas in Sydney, it's like, how you doing, move on to the next thing. There's so many moving parts living in a place like that. And up here, I just like the grounded nature of the way that the people behave and they care. And I think that that's what the Queenslanders... And I envy that a little bit, to be honest. The way that they care for their team and the way that the media look after the team and all those things. But it is what it is. But I think New South Wales can learn some lessons from some of that, yeah.
Yeah. Speaking of being here today, what is it that makes this ground so special, the Old Lang Park? What is it about it, Wally? What makes it so difficult for a New South Wales team to come here? Or am I phrasing that question wrong? What makes Queensland so strong here? That's probably the question for you. The first one should be for Girds. What makes Queensland so strong here at home?
Oh, it's probably come out many times before, but it's the legend of the place as well. In the early days, we used to like to remind New South Wales when they came up here that they were playing on Lang Park, as it was in those days, and remind them that it was a former cemetery. There is still a cemetery, and everyone laughs about it. Was it really? It was a former cemetery, and a lot of people still laugh, but there is still a cemetery at Suncorp Stadium.
Yeah, I died there a few times.
There is still a cemetery. There are gravestones still at Suncorp Stadium in the southeast corner of the ground. There is still a church there where there are services performed weekly, and a lot of people used to like to try and bring up that joke. You know, it's a good place to for your hopes to die at Suncorp Stadium, and it's just a ground that has a lot of history. And so did a place like the Sydney Cricket Ground. And I used to hate playing at the Sydney Cricket Ground. You'd go there, you're a long way off the fence, and we used to get lost quite often playing in the middle of the SCG. I can remember my early games there. I was trying to kick the ball and get it to roll into touch. I'd end up kicking it out by 20 metres, having no idea, whereas if you're playing on a rectangular ground with the seating going down very close to the ground, you have some sort of idea of how close it is. But while you're out in the middle of the SCG, and there were some wonderful battles took place there. They were quite remarkable, but it's just the history of the ground, I think, that creates a lot of the fear for many of the players.
What about all those screaming Queenslanders? Do you need to drive and you thrive off that energy that the crowd gives you when you're out there representing your state? Yeah,
you do. And there used to be I used to have a bit of a theory that if the crowd aren't part of the game at that stage, make them part of the game. There was only one or two ways to do that. Bung on a brawl. I used to say to the forwards, boys, it's time in the next scrum. Let's bung on a brawl.
You did not, Wally.
And Fatty,
I don't believe it.
Fatty used to turn around and say, "And where are you going to be in the brawl? You're a 5'8". You're standing back there about 20 or 30 metres." And I said, well, perhaps the fight will break up by the time I make it to all the way in there. And he used to roll his eyes, and of course the brawls used to take place, and they happened at the SCG as well. Yeah. I'm sure you remember some of those, but I used to describe the fights that took place as just an obvious display of how much those players wanted to win the game. Hey, they were prepared to do anything to achieve success.
Well, can you tell us about the can night? Where all the cans came on? Like, did you incite that? Was that your mastermind?
Maybe. We were doing it a little bit tough in that game, and of course the can bar used to be in this closest corner to the where we are at the moment. It was the northeast side of the ground, and we were doing it pretty tough in this particular game. And I knew that the forwards really needed to gain some dominance for us to get back into the match. Things just weren't going right. Everything New South Wales tried was successful. So I ended up kicking a ball into touch, and a couple of the blokes said, "What'd you kick the damn thing into touch for?" And I said, "Because we're about to have an all-in brawl. Start one, next scrum." And I could see the blokes rolling their eyes, and Fatty said, "I can't fucking fight. I've got no idea. I can't fight. Why would I get into that?" bung on a brawl, boys, and of course the all-in brawl started. We got 2 guys sent to the sin bin from there. The first one, I'm pretty sure was Sam. The second one, I got called in and I got given 5 minutes in the sin bin. And I thought, well, here's the chance now. And I started to have a whinge, as I'm sure you'll tell me I used to do most games, as I did most games, and made sure that it was obvious that I was quite angry about getting sent to the sin bin. And by the time that I'd made it across the other side of the field to go into the gate, our trainer said, have a look at this, turn around now. And the cans were flying at the players, at the referee, and who sort of went further infield to protect himself. And by the time we got into the dressing room, we sort of sat there for a while, and a couple of minutes later they said it's still going. They're just trying to clear all the cans from the field, and I had a bit of a smile on my face and I said, it's taken part. They've played their part. Now it's time for the players to pay theirs, and we ended up successful on that night.
Incredible.
And the only cost was to our fans who were whinging about paying $5.50 for a can of beer anyway.
Well, speaking of can throwing, Girds, you were on the famous last bus journey down this very street.
Yeah.
Can you share your memories of that day with us, please?
Yeah, first, in relation to the question before, Jimmy, about what makes them so hard to beat.
My bad.
Yeah. It really is. It really is that connection with the people. I believe that you just see the players that go out there and they just dead set don't want to let you guys down, or the home fan. They do not want to let them down. You can just see it and you can feel it when you play against them. So it really does feel like they have home ground advantage is one thing, and you probably see it a fair bit with the Premier League, in your time in England. But yeah, there's just this connection that the players actually have with the community and with the fans there that just make them almost impossible to beat. Almost, I think I beat them once or twice. I had some success in an Origin up here.
Can you feel that when you're out there as an opposition player?
Yeah,
you
and especially when
that actual sense of.
But who feels it most? The referee. The referee has a trouble, honestly, being impartial, I believe, at Suncorp Stadium, but that's a whole other story. But it's just phenomenal, mate. It's incredible that the reaction that the people, or the impact that the people can have there on the team, especially when and you can hear it, and then the Queenslander chant and that starts, and you're like, oh shit, here we go. Here we go.
Did you address that as a group before you went? What was your tactic? We'll block it out, we'll embrace it, we'll just not be scared of it, we'll react? What's the tactic going in?
Well, you know what it's like when you're going into those situations, mate. You're up for it. You bring it on. Whatever comes that way, comes your way during those Origins. I mean, that's just all part of what Origin is. But, it's about trying to keep them out of it by dominating the contest. And that's what they did in, 22 when they won all 3 games up here, or whatever, or 2 games and lost the last one. But you just got to keep them out of it, and you do that by early points. But early points are really hard to come by in Origins.
Yeah, it's easier said than done.
Yeah, it's easier said than done.
Just get an early try, lads.
But the second Origin I played, I'm not sure, late 90s. There was one we won the one in Sydney, and it was game 2 up here. And so I hadn't played an Origin in Queensland, and everyone it was Lang Park, I think, still then. And obviously really excited about the opportunity, seen it all before, but never had the experience. So we got to the hotel. We were staying down the road there, and we got into you have a pre-bus meeting where the coach just goes over a couple of last minor details about preparation and whatnot. And then a few of the older boys came in, and Tubes and that were like, anyone that hasn't played at Suncorp before sits on the left-hand side of the bus. It's like, okay, well, I haven't played, so I'm on the left-hand side of the bus. Why am I on the left-hand side of the bus? No one's telling anyone why you're on the left-hand side of the bus, but I think there's about 4 or 5 of us that were on the left-hand side of the bus, sitting on the window, and then we'd get to the top of Caxton Street, and then we start coming down, and then everyone just flooded from both sides, but mainly the Caxton side. They just flooded onto the road and stopped the bus and started shaking it. It's like, okay, that's why I'm sitting on the left-hand side of the bus. And then anyone that couldn't shake it decided to throw full cans of 4X and bourbon and cola or whatever it was at the bus, and then started cracking the windscreen and all that sort of stuff. So it got out of hand, and that's why we're not allowed to drive down there anymore, which is really unfortunate because it was an experience that I'll never forget. It was incredible, and it actually just prepared you for what was to come, because then you get off the bus and then they're India and then you run out and so it's just almost like the rite of passage, and it's unfortunate that they don't get to do it anymore.
See, that's an indication of how they misread the situation, the New South Welshmen. They're welcoming them to the area, saying, welcome to Paddington, welcome to the hotel district, welcome to one of the most famous hotels in Australia here at Brisbane. And, it was just all rock and roll, get ready for a little bit of footy later and dancing later in the night. And we'd like to make you feel quite welcome, but I'm pretty sure, Girds, that was the last time that ever happened, that they invited New South Wales. And we ended up turning it around, actually. We were sort of ruled against coming down Caxton Street, and whenever we used to lose a game, I'd suggest it might be a bad idea to inspire the blokes, get them to come down Caxton Street, and that was the reply we got back from the New South Wales blokes saying, "You blokes are Fruit Loops. If you go down that street and put up with that shit, that's the way that it is." But they did play an enormous role, and I can imagine what it must have felt like, for the New South Wales players to go down there, and I'm pretty sure that would have stopped fairly swiftly.
Yeah. When you're on the bus and you're in such a hostile environment like that, are you looking around to see some people's reactions? I know we have different characters within the playing group throughout all the squads I've ever played, and you get some that would be like, come on, let's get off the bus and take them on. You'd have some that would be a bit sheepish. And obviously, this is all 2 hours before kickoff. Like, how do you look at each other's emotions and almost control them, like the ones that are saying let's get off the bus and go bananas versus the ones that are going into their shell a little bit?
No, I think everyone sort of goes inward in those moments on the buses, I find. Generally everyone just keeps to themselves and deals with their own preparation. I don't think it really put anyone... the intended result probably, didn't happen for the Queensland people. But it's all a little bit of theatre for those guys. But for us, it was just, that you're so far into your preparation. And I think the whole thing about that 10-day period of origin is every day the intensity grows. And honestly, by game day, you're just ready to go to war. You are just, and that wasn't even my style, but just by that point at origin, you are just ready for whatever comes. And that's just all part of the program on the day.
Yeah. Hey, speaking of some of the rivalries, that it's Queensland v New South Wales, but there can be personal rivalries there as well. Wally, with you, one of those was the battle for the Australian captaincy with Ray Price. Can you talk to us a bit about that?
Well, it came part of the pre-match build-up in 1984. Max Krilich was the Australian captain. Max decided to retire at the end of the 83 one, so it wasn't just a little bit of state of origin pride that was on the line. There was also the next Australian captain to be named, and of course the media went to town on it in the build-up to the first game. Ray Price was the New South Wales captain, and at the end of the game, I think we beat them quite convincingly that game. I'm not sure whether that was the one that was 43-20, a real big scoreline, but at the end of the game, they walked up to Ray and just said, well, who do you think should be the Australian captain tonight? And Ray sidestepped the question 3 or 4 times, and they said, no, we'll put it back to you. Who do you think should be this? And then he jumped straight in. He said, oh, look, fair dinkum, give it to Wally. He's got everything else up here he owns, and you dickheads keep giving him and telling him how good he is, so give him the Australian captaincy. And that sort of was a little bit of the... well, it wasn't humour between us. I think we lost a lot of the friendship part of it, but he's one of those guys, I think, Ray, that played the game super seriously, and was one of the greatest challengers for your success on the football field. He really busted his butt, and I still don't think I've seen a guy that ever put as much effort into a game than what he did. But being honest, did we like him? No, we didn't. Did he like me? No, he didn't. I can guarantee that. But Ray Price, that's what he was. He was a proud New South Welshman that was probably one of Queensland's prime targets during an Origin series.
Yeah. One of the attributes we look for in State of Origin is toughness. You've got an interesting story on who the toughest player you played alongside in this arena.
Yeah. There's a group of them that come into this one. I guess it's just a matter of opinion who you think is who it is. I'll probably let the people make their own mind up on this one, mate, and get back to it a little bit later. But it's a situation where we've seen some of the bravest performers at Origin level come into place. And make great contact for it. And pride's a wonderful thing. They can be as hurt as they'll ever be in their lifetime, but they'll keep going up for the insistence of they think they're a fair chance of winning.
But there was a story on Peter Jackson. Can you tell us about him?
Yeah, Peter Jackson was one of those guys. Sorry, mate, that was a perfect lead into my answer of the question, and just shows what a dickhead I am for not answering the question straight away. It just shows you I had a large part of my brain removed when I had epilepsy, and there is the excuse being offered. I didn't remember it. Peter Jackson was a wonderful bloke. He was one of those guys that I think everybody wanted to have him in your team. There are a lot of people that used to suggest Jacko wasn't the full quid, but he was a guy that used to live life in the fast lane at all times. But whenever we used to drive to training, we'd have a minibus, and I started being the bus driver whenever we used to go, and I used to drive a little bit quicker than I was probably allowed to by the police, and we used to get to the situation where we developed this bit of a belief that whoever got on the bus last had to get in the middle in the middle seat of the very back row of the bus. They'd leave everyone to jump on the bus and leave that middle seat open, and then when they got on the bus, I'd take off and let the clutch out and just really give it some. All the players sitting there used to stick their foot out to trip whoever it was as he was trying to run down the back, and he'd fall over, and as soon as he'd fall over, they'd end up pouring bottles of water over him, kicking him on the ground. But Peter Jackson got on. He was a bit smarter. He's thinking, I'm going to take Wally on at his own game here, and I could see him thinking about something, and he said, "You're not going to get me, you're not going to get me." And I said, "Oh, well, Jacko, let's see how we go." And just as he got on the bus, and it looked like he was heading for the back, I let the clutch out and gave it to it, and Jacko obviously thought, "I'm going to counter this, I'm going to actually run forward so that when he takes off, it'll counter it, and I won't get anywhere." And I looked at Jacko, and he started heading forward. After I'd taken off for about 3 or 4 metres, I jammed the brakes on. He went sailing straight through the air, went into the windscreen, smashed the windscreen, head came down, hit the dash, and then went down, and I saw his head laying next to the gear stick as I looked down. And I looked over, and Gene Miles was sitting there, and he said, "I think you're in a bit of fucking trouble at the moment." And I turned around, and of course, who's at the back of the bus but our coach, Wayne Bennett, who said that a former policeman himself, who simply got off and started his walk back to the hotel. And I thought, I'm in the shit with him. I'm in the shit with him. And Jacko simply jumped to his feet and he said, He said, if that can't stop the great Peter Jackson, those New South Wales blokes are no chance of doing it. Let's go, Queensland. And away he went. And he was a wonderful bloke, Jacko, and a very sad loss. He was just a good footy player, one that used to respect blokes from every club, no matter who they played for. And once again, it was a very sad loss. He was one of the greatest guys that you would ever meet.
Yeah. As this segment of the show is all about Queensland, Girds, I'm going to come to you first for your worst ever Origin moment.
Yeah, I was fortunate enough to play a fair bit of Origin with Laurie Daly, one of New South Wales' greatest, and it was maybe the '99 series. We were playing up here in a decider, and it was 14 all. It was a wet night. It was 14 all, and it'd been a ding dong series, like toing and froing. But Queensland must have won it, I think, in '98, and we were drawn up with about 8 or 9 minutes to go, and we scored in about 12 metres in from the right-hand touchline, and I had a kick on a wet night to potentially, because the points were at a premium, so there wasn't a lot going on, and I kind of knew that Loz last game, he'd announced that it was going to be his final match, and then I had the opportunity from about 12 metres in from the sideline, so a gettable kick to knock it over, and it hit me like a ton of bricks in the moment. Like, you know, you had different ways with dealing with pressure, with goal kicking and stuff in big moments, but I got overwhelmed, not by the crowd, who were quite loud as well, but just by the moment of what that was going to mean to Laurie, and I just fucking shanked it. I don't know if I've ever hit a ball worse. Honestly, I lost my legs, like the whole bit. I got to the point where I was standing back at the end of my run-up, and I'm thinking to myself, I should give this to someone else. I'm in no state. I was overcome and I couldn't control it, and it's never happened to me before. And I got the result that I knew was kind of coming, and we drew the game 14-all, and they won the series, and Loz retired on that note. And I remember going up to him after the game, and I was inconsolable. You know, is that a word, inconsolable? I don't know, whatever it is. And yeah, it took, mate. I still to this day, like, I have moments where I think about it, and how I could have helped Laurie go out, and he deserved to go out a certain way, but I didn't. And so that was definitely my worst moment at Suncorp. Yeah, well, horrible one. Thanks
for sharing that with us, mate. That's really insightful. But Wally, over to you. What's your favourite Origin moment? There's plenty of them, but is there one that really sticks out?
I'd probably put it down to three. The first one, I had the privilege of going onto the ground with the late great Arthur Beetson. It was just a thrill to go on with that great man. He taught us more about football in the space of a couple of weeks than the best psychologists could have. He was sensational for a lot of the players. Of course, he was a man at 35 years of age, had probably already displayed his prime and got over it. There were some sensational times, but to have him as coach was quite remarkable. Game 2, 1989, I find that almost impossible to match with other ones. Queensland ended up that game with 12 men, and it's the only State of Origin game in history where a team has finished with one player short. We had Mal fractured his cheekbone. Alan Langer broke his leg just prior to half-time. There was Michael Hancock dislocated his shoulder, and there was a stage where late in the game we were in front just, and Bobby Lindner, I had him defending inside me on the right side defence, and he was particularly slow at moving back and forward, and I started to abuse him. I said, Bob, we've been friends a long time. I said, they ain't going to continue if you keep going like that. Keep moving up. Don't let us down. We haven't got long to go, and we're doing the countdown, 11 minutes, 10 minutes, 9 minutes, and we got to 8 minutes, and I looked at him and I screamed at him. I said, if you let us go, I said, you'll never play another game for Queensland. I said, don't let us go. And he kept hopping and leaning forward, and they nearly broke through. We managed to just stop them from scoring a try, the Blues. And I turned around to the trainer and I just said, get some water to the boys. And I said, where the hell is Bobby? I said, he's not moving up in the line again. He said, we had to take him off. He's got a broken leg. And I turned around and I looked, and there he was. He was loaded up, and I thought, perhaps I've gone a little bit hard on him this evening. I shouldn't have done that, and saw him in the dressing room that night. And Queensland, we finished with 12 men that night, and I'm always asked what is the moment that I remember best or recall being Queensland's finest ever, and it was that one. We got a standing ovation from the New South Wales crowd at the Sydney Football Stadium, and I said, boys, I can guarantee you another thing tonight. We will never, ever get another standing ovation from this crowd. It'll be the Wally's a Wanker and Queensland sucks all the way, but just accept it. Thank the crowd for doing it. At the end of that game, we sat in the dressing rooms, and we basically didn't go out and celebrate. They were too tired. And that was it. And the other one was my last game of footy. I got the chance to be able to thank the people that had been enormously beneficial to any success that I had in a career, and it was my mum and dad. We had a thing on on Channel 9 last night that I was watching, where Mum always, they asked her what did she recall most, and she said of him breaking the windows all the time. But on not one occasion did they ever try and change anything that I or my brothers did. We had a love for rugby league, and we felt privileged to be part of the game, and to have that chance and be given an opportunity by two wonderful parents was the reason that I enjoyed a little bit of success at footy.
Wally, what's the best pre-game speech you've ever received when playing in one of these huge games?
It came from Arthur Beetson in his last time when he was coaching Queensland, where he declared that it had been the proudest moment, the proudest times of his life when he got the opportunity to coach the Queensland side. He said when he got to play for Queensland the first time, it was an extremely proud moment, as was when he was playing for New South Wales and also captain of Australia. He said, but in his last time being in charge of Queensland, he felt that he'd really helped develop a group of players and brought them to a position of power that was enormously proud. And one of those times where he used to sort of bring up a point, Ron McAuliffe then went and repeated it in a dressing room. And I hope I haven't told this story already today. My memory's shot to bits, but it was about Queensland's team who we had to thank. Have I brought that one up today? No. Who we had to thank as the most influential person for Queensland's success. Went through, he said, is it Lewis as captain? Is it Meninga, his power? Is it the Fords that are dominating? And he, so Wally, will ask you, who do you think has been the most influential person? And I went to answer it, and the Senator Ron got up out of his chair and he walked backwards and forwards across the stage a couple of times, and all the journos were going, Senator, we've asked Wally. He said, but I'll answer this one. I know the answer to this one. Who was the most influential person? It's the Lord, Jesus Christ. And the Sydney journos went, oh, the Senator's been on the port again. He sounds a little bit too topped up. And he said, is that right, smart ass? You think I've been on the port? All right, and I wouldn't know what I'm saying. Well, how does this sound as a team? Fullback, Colin Scott. The rest of the back line, Kerry Bosted, Gene Miles, Mel Meninga, Chris Close, Wally Lewis, Mark Murray. The forward pack, Paul Vaughton, Wally Fulton-Smith, Brian Niebling, Greg Dowling, Greg Canescu and Dave Brown. Every one of those blokes is born within 18 months, 2 weeks and 2 days of each other. Every one of those blokes, by the time that they left primary school, had played at least 30 to 40 times against or alongside other players. Every one of those players, by the time that they'd reached high school, had played against or alongside each other at least 60 to 70 times. And every one of those players, by the time that they played tonight's successful State of Origin game, have played against or alongside each other at least 90 to 95 times. So I think the big bloke upstairs has been pretty good to us, wouldn't you say that, smart ass? And of course all the journos were scribbling it down. They wanted to get it first, and the radio guys, they'd recorded it, racing out to get it on air. And I looked at Ron, and I was still in my seat, and I thought, well, that question was coming to me until you jumped in. And I said, Ron, that's remarkable. And he said, what is? And I said about that, I said, I didn't even think about that, but you're right. Colin Scott's a 59 baby, Kerry Bosted's a 59er, Gino's 59, Mal's 60, Chris Close is 59, I'm 59, Mark Murray's 59, Paul Vaughton's 59, Fullerton Smith and Niebling are both born in 1960, Greg Dowling's 59, Canescu is born in 60, and Dave Brown is 59. But you're right. And he said, what are you talking about? And I said, the birth date. And you gave how many times we've played together and all that sort of stuff. He said, I've got no idea whether it's right, but those dickhead journalists swallowed it and got rid of him straight away. And I went and had a look at him, and the Senator got up from the chair and walked away, and I thought, that's the way they work in federal politics. Now I understand it.
Nothing wrong with your memory, Wal. Incredible.
How about you kids? Any famous pre-game
speeches? How do you back up that? I mean, that just describes the difference between New South Wales and Queensland sometimes, doesn't it? Look, our one, Wayne Pearce brought some interesting concepts into camp when he came in the late 90s, and he used to always try and get some people just before, the moment you would get on the bus to leave the hotel, he'd always try and bring an influential member from somewhere. We had Russell Crowe once, and Jimmy Barnes came in and sing Working Class Man. Wasn't so relevant, but anyway, it was good to watch. It was entertaining, and I'm sitting there with guys like Brian Fletcher, and they're just taking the piss out of all this sort of stuff. So, but on this one occasion, he brought in the New South Wales Premier at the time, Bob Carr. Does anyone know Bob? Remember Bob? He was a big tall guy, probably 6'4", big guy, like big presence. So we're sitting in this little room in the hotel there at the Coogee Bay, and Bob Carr stands up and starts delivering this speech about what it means to, New South Wales and the state, and goes into depth and starts naming all these different regions, these country towns and these people and the hardships, and does this beautiful big speech, and we're all buying in. Right, that's it, we're ready to get on the bus. So, and Bob's just finishing up his speech. He looks at us all, he eyeballs us all. Takes a moment, like there's this silence, and then goes, now boys, go and give it to these fucking Victorians. Oh my God. Thanks, Bob. We'll just get on the bus.
What on earth was the reaction to that?
Oh, God, it was funny. It was comical, because he got us there for a while. It's like the politician, they can sell. We all bought until, just ruin the end, unfortunately. Not by much.
The devil's in the detail, right?
It was the moment, to be honest. It was the moment. But anyway, we've all done that. Ruined the moment.
On a New South Wales perspective, Gerd, you've been involved with some great players. You're involved in the fastest ever try at state of origin, but there's a bit of a backstory to this, isn't there? I'm sure our listeners would love to hear this.
Yeah, look, I'll keep it pretty short. Brad Fittler played a few origins with Freddie and been a long, I played with him at Penrith and had a really good relationship with him. And the captain, as Wally knows, always gets their own little room when you go to the hotel. And it was Freddie announced that it was his last game. It was up here. I think it was game 3 in maybe 01, 02, I can't remember what year it was. It was a decider. And so anyway, there's a couple of hours to go before we're getting on the bus, and Freddie gives me a call and says, mate, can you come up to my room? I said, sure, bud, I'll come up. So we're all getting ready. It's been a big week preparing. I think it might have even been the game where Alfie came back and we kind of didn't know about it. Where was that? ANZ, what was that stadium called? ANZ Stadium? Yeah, shit ground, that one. Awful hot. Anyway. So anyway, I get up, knock on the door, and Freddie answers, and he's just there, just sort of casually go and sit on the couch. And I said, what's up, buddy? He goes, I can't do it. I said, what do you mean you can't do it? So I can't play. I'm not ready. I said, Freddie, mate, you've played 30-something Origins. This is your swan song. You're the leader of this team. We're 1-1 in the series. We're about to face the enemy on enemy territory, and you're telling me you don't want to play? He said, I don't want to play. You're going to have to go down and tell Junior that I'm not playing. I said, I'm not going to go and do that. I said, mate, you need to play. He said, no, I can't do it, mate. I've been thinking about it all week. And then he started going like Tallis and Webke and Petro. And he said, mate, physically, I'm just not ready for it. I'm not going to take the field. I said, mate, you're going to play. You're the captain. I turned a little bit on him. Anyway, and I gave him about 15 or 20 minutes. I said, mate, get your shit together and we're going to go down. We're getting on the bus and then we're going to go on and do what we need to do. So I went back to my room thinking, well, I hope he turns up, because at the point I left him, he wasn't getting on the bus to play his final game, which was incredible, really. So anyway, so we get down, we're on the bus, and he turns up, which is good, and we get into the game, and I kick off, and then someone dropped it off the kickoff, and then Freddie's at 6, I'm at left centre, there's Wendell, and I think might have been Darren Smith was maybe there. I don't know, I ran straight past him, whoever it was anyway. And Freddie gives me an out ball, and I'm 40 seconds in, and I'm in the corner. Yeah, threw Wendell a dummy, and didn't he take a dummy, big deal. There you go, Wendell. There you go, big fella. How'd you go? He was off over the sideline somewhere. And anyway, so scored in the corner, and then Freddie put me in the space, right? So I'm turning around to connect. It's like, mate, you're good. We're good, brother. It's like, we're on. Here we go. We've scored after 40 seconds. And he wouldn't connect. He wouldn't, no eye contact, turn around, was already back on halfway, not even there to celebrate the try. I'm like, fuck, we're screwed. This is no good. So then I got the ball and I was kicking shit at clubland. I'm like, oh shit, I'm kicking really bad. And they got Graham Arnold in to do some kicking with me during the week. I was kicking that bad at clubs. And anyway, I kicked shit with Graham Arnold all week, and I'm like, I'm not going to hit anything tonight. But anyway, whatever. And I kick it from the sideline. I surprised the shit out of myself. I'm like, I've finally hit one from the sideline. Just ran back as I'm doing it all year, And then I'm looking to connect with Freddie, and he just wasn't there for me. Wasn't there for the team. We got beat by in the end, we got beat by about 30 points. And it was probably the worst moment in Freddie's Origin career.
Yeah, wow.
And then he came, and that's why it was so important. I thought it was so important that I think he came back then in 2004 and got called in, and they had some injuries and was able to play his last game and then went out in the way that he deserved to go out. But that was his last game up until that moment, and that was, I think it was also the game where Alfie came back. So it was an interesting series, that one. But yeah, pretty crazy story, right?
Yeah, it's crazy.
Anyway, it can't all be funny. Some series. Origin's all about, theatre and emotion, and yeah, that was a pretty indifferent moment.
Yeah. Well, speaking of theatre and emotion, Wally, you were loved here, but down in New South Wales, what was it like being on the receiving end of 80,000 people singing "Wally's a Wanker"?
Yeah, well, I did.
I've had about 6,000 people say that to me, but not as many as what you have.
Yeah, there were quite a number that were chanting "Wally's a Wanker." I think there was 44,365. However many were in there. I think the only ones that weren't were a couple of people on the Queensland bench, and maybe our bus driver. He was a Queenslander, but that used to. I've got to say that used to inspire me, but. And I'll make sure that no one's recording this one. I remember I turned around and there we were at the Sydney Cricket Ground when we were playing, and it was Wally's a Wanker, and turned around to Fatty, and I thought, I'll just get him to give me a little bit of inspiration as he normally did. So we did the coin toss. After that, while it was going on, usually it used to be in current days. You used to do it before the game, but for this one we did it out the middle, and I turned around to Fatty. I said, we've won the toss, and there was Wally's a Wanker, and the other end, Wally sucks, Wally sucks. And I turned around and I said, okay, I'll do the toss. There it goes. I said, we won the toss, Fatty, which way do you want to run? And he went that way. I turned around and I looked at the referee, and he was in a fit of laughter. He had his head down and he walked away, and Paddy just had the head wobble going after that. Fuck. This bloke's on my side, on my team. So I just said, I don't think he's going to give me any advice. I will run that way, and I'm not sure which one it was. And he, as I ran back to get in position, I looked over him. He had a smile and he said, "You're feeling inspired?" And I just looked at him and said, "You're a dickhead, you are." Yeah. That's Paul Vaughton. That's the way that it was. And at full time, though, that we pretty much had arms around each other, and he was a rock for me.
Yeah.
The Fat, he used to make sure that everyone wasn't searching for glory. What they were challenging themselves with was to work well together, to work for their mates, to work for the people at home in Queensland, and every time that he did it, he was invaluable. He was quite remarkable, Paul, and he very rarely got a reward that it was deserving.
Just a quick one is to flip the first side of the first segment of the show. Do you have a worst Origin moment? Yeah, I do. Pretty much when I played at Brett Kenny, against Brett Kenny, he was the best 5'8" that I played against. He was wonderful, Brett. I used to wonder whether he was the full quid, and I don't know whether you've heard of Girds, but we were playing against him at Lang Park or Suncorp Stadium. Well, it was Lang Park in those days, and we were standing deep on our own territory. New South Wales just failed to score a try, and I started screaming at the blokes, "Get serious, if we don't take them on, if we don't stop them." And I looked over at Gino, and he was laughing, and I said, "What are you laughing at, you dickhead? They've nearly scored a try. Get serious with it." And he said, "You've got to have a look at Bert." And I went, "Don't look at him. Don't look at him. He'll be dictating terms to you. Don't look at him." He said, "You've got to look at him." And I've looked over at Bert. I thought, "I'll get it done." I've looked over and he dropped his dick out the side of the shorts and then put it back in. I thought, this is the biggest rugby league game of your career, of your lifetime. And he's pointing the blue vein mutton gun out the side just to do that. And he shook hands. At the end of the game, we thanked each other and went on. I said, "You're an idiot. You are an absolute idiot." And he was one of those guys that any break in play, he'd have a pressure release, but as soon as the game started again, he was fantastic. He was a wonderful player. Wonderful player. Girds, how about you? What was your favourite Origin moment?
I think everyone remembers the moment they get the call, and then I was able to call my mother and the parents and the people that have been on the journey with you. So for me, it was that moment. And I remember I called Mum, and it was talk in the media, and I'd been thereabouts, and I called, and she's like, "Are you in? Are you in?" And I said, "Yeah, I'm in." She's like, "He's in, he's in, he's in. I'll put your father on." And so the old man gets on, he goes, "So you're in?" I said, "Yeah." He said, "Where you playing?" I said, "In the centres." He said, "You know what that means?" I said, "Yeah." He said, "You don't let anyone down." I said, "I'll do my best. Can I get some tickets?" "Yeah." "I'll put your mother back on." She comes back on. "You're in, you're in, you're in." "Yeah, I'm in." "Oh, hang on. Your father's crying. I haven't seen your father cry in 30 years. Oh my God, I've got to go." Up on me. But then I just realised, what it meant to people around. I've never seen my father cry, but he broke down on the back of that. So yeah, Or maybe a couple of report cards I took anyway.
Yeah,
yeah.
Wow, that's incredible.
Yeah.
That really is. All right, now it's time for some questions from our listeners. So the
coming over to the live mic here, guys. You want to ask a question?
Girds. Apart from being outside the best 5'8" in the game, Wally, who is the best half you've been alongside and why?
I would say Lockie. Yeah, was able to play a fair bit of footy with Lockie late 90s, early 2000s. I think we went on 3 tours together. Just the most gifted athlete and player that I've ever played with. Moved across the ground better than anyone. Had the most time. Unfortunately, I got to play against Wally. You won't remember, right? So I was 18. He was playing for the Gold Coast Seagulls, right? And it was the biggest deal for me because I was about 5 games into my career, and we're playing Wally, and he was done at the Seagulls, but I didn't care.
That's a nice way of saying I played like a busted ass. I was easy to sidestep and score tries around.
But I still got to play against him. And anyway, so I ran at him, and I must have been the only tackle he made all day. He tackled me around the legs, and he said, "Good on you, young fella." And honestly, that made my day. But to answer your question, Lockie.
All right, we might have time for one more question, Charlie. Two more, yeah.
Okay.
Sorry, guys. Yeah, let's go.
A neutral question for you, James. So can you kind of tell us about making the transition from playing from St Helens and coming to play here in the toughest competition in the world?
Yeah, look, it was a big decision for me. Leaving England, obviously came through there at St Helens with a number of friends of mine. We grew up together. And then also, it's just interesting hearing about, listening to these two guys speak about the people that are on your journey with you. So I started playing the game of rugby league at about 7 and a half, and I could count on one hand at the age of 26 when I moved over to play for this country how many games my dad had missed. So from all those games at playing amateur, playing in trial games, coming through from the St Helens Academy, coming on tours over here as a youngster. He came out, followed me here, came to France with my granddad for a couple of junior games there. I played a couple of tour games over here, and my parents came with me. So my dad had actually only missed a handful of games. You could count on one hand, and he wasn't going to get that anymore. So it was a huge decision. That was probably the biggest element to it, leaving those people behind. Because when you're for me, rugby league, it wasn't just my life, but it was my family's life, and it was strange to leave that behind. It became everything for my mum and dad as well. They were friendly with all the other players' parents, and it was part of their life, and it was a bit strange to leave that behind and start again. But I'm incredibly glad I did. It now gives my parents an excuse to come here and holiday with us. So I can't get rid of them. I actually might send them up to Queensland next time they come over. No joke. My mum, she's booking flights to come over in September, early September, and she goes, I'm only going to book a one way. I was like, what do you mean? Like, book? No, you book you need to book a return. It's cheaper for one. Don't be booking a one way. And she goes, "Oh, it's all right, son. I need to be back in England for late November." I'm like, it's 8 weeks. This is a legitimate conversation I had with her about 2 days ago. So hopefully she's listening to this and she gets the message. 8 weeks is too long.
Firstly, James, what do you think about Wally's impression, like the accent, and also Ryan Girdler? You worked on the footy show during the golden era. What was your favourite Their House segment?
So firstly, Wally's impression of Barry Off giving him a call is outstanding. I can just imagine what that phone call was like. But over to you, Girds, for the last part of the question.
It's interesting, yeah. I did one with Jason Stevens, and that was actually... And Matty, I don't think Matty was actually doing much TV then. I think, is Matty younger? I don't know how old Matty is. But we came sort of through about the same time, but I'm not sure Matty was doing a lot of TV then. And he found a way onto Jason. He must have been playing at the Sharks. And Steve-O said, oh, yeah, Matty's going to come. And I'd played a bit with Matty. We'd been on a couple of tours and that together. And I said, yeah, bring Matty along. No problem at all. So then Matty, all of a sudden, I walk up with Steve-O into the top of his house, and there's Trent. Remember, Matty had this guy, Trent. There's Matty. There's Matty Johns laying on the couch in a flight attendant's suit. Comes over and goes, "Hey boys, what's going on?" I'm like, "Who's this guy?" So yeah, that was. I'm not going to say that launched Matty's career, but I think that was the start of one of his characters anyway. So that was a good one.
Oh, that's brilliant. All right, well, that just about wraps us up. I've just got to say a huge thank you to everybody at Ladbrokes for making this a possibility. I'll do a big six again. Huge thank you to Ladbrokes. Special mentions to Cam Scott, Tommy Hackett. Also a big shout out to the Atomic team, Bryn, Ainsley and Michael. Thank you to the Lord Alfred for their hospitality. And most importantly, thank you to our wonderful guests. Rounds of applause for Wally Lewis and Ryan Girdler. They've got a huge day ahead of them, so we'll be mingling around till around about 3 o'clock. Make sure you enjoy the rest of the festivities here and enjoy the game tonight. But also, finally, I just want to say thank you to you guys, our loyal listeners. We are so happy that you're here, joining us here for our very first live show today. Thank you so much for listening and being part of this journey with us. We really do appreciate it. Thank you again to Ladbrokes for making this a huge possibility. So, yeah, thank you so much, everyone.